doing?
But I'm excited to chat with you tonight. We're talking about Rolling 75. So let's just jump right in, and you can tell
Sounds
us a
good.
little bit about you and maybe give us a synopsis of this book.
Okay, sounds good. Well, you want me to start with me or the book?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
go with you.
So I published my first book, which was a series that Rolling 75 is a spin-off from, at the end of January in 2024. So it's been a year and a half. This is my fifth book, and kind of been a whirlwind, ups and downs, and all kinds of excitement. But yeah, so my first series is the Court series, and that's a four-book series. They do have to be read in order, but it's like different couples in each, and there's no cliffhangers, but they build. And during that series, there is a hotel run by six siblings, five of them being brothers. And that is what this series is about. So Rolling 75 is it's about Le Noire, which is a prohibition inspired resort and casino that caters to like the criminal underworld, mafia, secret societies, corrupt politicians, um, all of that fun stuff. And so they definitely deal with underhanded, they're kind of like gods to gangsters, if you will. But the first couple is Riker and Mercy. They've been friends for 20 years, and about 3 years ago he's kind of always had a thing for her, but it really started to develop, and then she got pregnant with somebody else's baby, and that turned into a domestic abuse situation that was very dangerous for her. So actually, the men from court, they erase people. So they agreed to erase her, and at the last minute, she asked to please do it without Riker's knowledge. So she gets erased. He doesn't know where she is, and for 3 years, even though he's friends with the courtmen, they won't reveal where she is because they made a deal with her. And so he's trying to track her down, and the book picks up when he finds her. And so he finds her, brings her back, and it's really it's a book about their ups and downs and their healings and kind of getting past that, friendship to lovers hurdle that can be difficult, and also the hurdle of the past.
So I yeah, the book it does pick up like where he's finding her. Does him searching for her happen at all in the other series? This is the first book of yours I've read, so I'm curious to know a little bit about that.
So in the court series, you very early on in the very first book, Burning Ivy, you meet Riker and all the other brothers, but you specifically kind of talk to Riker and Axel. In that, Riker is asking the court men for updates on her. They still won't reveal where she is, but they do let him know like she's okay, she's thriving, the baby's doing well, that kind of thing. And then there's also kind of at the time, the man who assaulted her is still living. And so they're working, she didn't want to testify, so they're working on another angle to get to prosecute him. So that's kind of what you see throughout the book. You see that progression, which he summarizes what happens, and what ultimately um, brings down her abuser and all of that. But even once all of that is handled, in the last book of court, you see that she still refuses to return. So that's kind of where it picks up. You
Okay.
don't have to see that in order to understand, Rolling 75, but for court readers, it was exciting because they've been seeing it trickled through.
No, I love that about just like continuing in a world when you get the little Easter eggs and stuff like that. And I didn't feel
Mhm.
at all like you needed to know that information, but I was curious to know kind of the backstory and where it started. But where did you get the inspiration for this series? So did you know when you were writing the other that you were going to expand into this world?
I did. So it was planned from the very beginning. I kind of had like a nine-book idea, but I knew it couldn't be the same series for two reasons. One was the trajectory of like the path that the characters took was going to be very different, even though it intersected. And the vibes of both series are different. So Court is a little darker. It's not, my books aren't super dark, but they are dark. And there's a darker tone if that makes sense. Whereas the the Noire Brothers series, you've got the darkness, you've got the heavy subjects, but there's also this lightness because it's run at a resort that has opulence and fun and antics, and it's just a different atmosphere. And so it couldn't be the same series, but I wanted there to be a place in court that was almost their safe haven because they don't have in court, um, they have hidden identities. No one knows who they really are. It's like the entire time they are hiding from everyone. So this is the one place they go where they can almost be just more comfortable. They still take precautions, but they're more comfortable with who they are there. And so that's why it takes place there. And so it was always part of the plan, but also part of the plan was to have it be two different series.
So, I mean, it sounds like you did a lot of thinking about it before you actually started building, but what would you say is your method to building a whole world and laying groundwork, but keeping the focus on the current story being told?
Well, I think a lot of it just has to unfold naturally. I'm a big proponent of not info dumping. So there's lots of things to know about La Lune Noir, but you don't need to know them all in the first book, if that makes sense. Same thing with Court. Court is a secret society, and you learn a lot about it in Burning Ivy, but you learn a little bit more in each book because those are the things that matter to that story. So I think part of it is my process is always a lot in my head. I can kind of see it. I'm visual, so I see the world and I know what visual elements I want to add, what rules kind of are going to play into that world, how things will function. And then I just decide what elements need to be revealed at what time based on the couple and how that works with their story. I think that helps keep them the focus if you're not mentioning things that don't really matter to that couple.
Yeah, that sounds like a really great point of view. I think that there is so many opportunities to get overwhelmed by details and you can get lost in them. So I thought that it was paced very well. Not that you need like my feedback in that way, but
Oh, I'm
it
happy to
was.
have it. I
I
appreciate
enjoyed it.
that.
I think you did what you set out to do.
Well,
um,
good.
how do you approach writing multiple points of view?
I first of all, I love multiple POVs. I'm glad that's much more of a standard now because for years, when I would read a single POV, I I was almost like I struggled sometimes buying into what the other person was saying without knowing it was true, if that makes sense. Like there was this part of me that I felt like there was such a burden on the author to let their actions 100% scream what their words were saying so that I believed that this romance was something I should root for. So I really love dual POVs, and I think it's important to give each character something that pulls them apart. So when you're in that person's POV, you kind of it's their POV because not because it says Mercy at the top of the page, but because Mercy has certain quirks that are going to stick out and that's her, or not because it says Riker, but because you feel his obsession vibrating through his words, and without a doubt that's Riker. And so I try to give each character just some elements that the reader can kind of hold on to. Sometimes physical, sometimes catchphrases, things like that pull them out, and I think that helps me to stick to the voice of the POV, and it kind of helps like you feel like those people are blending.
Well, I found one of the plot lines that carried through to me was kind of taking back this power over your own life, which I feel like we see with Mercy. And maybe she wasn't necessarily doing it in the way she expected when she did get erased, like you mentioned. But why did you feel like this was such a vital part of her story? And why was it important that Riker kind of be alongside her for some of that?
Well, big theme for all my books is like beauty and the broken. I really like to show how beautiful messy can be, that just because things have shattered or things have gone wrong or not the way we planned, it doesn't mean it's over. Because we often have those moments where it feels like the end of the world, like we will never move on. And Mercy's was so monumental. It was such a huge event in all of their lives. And so it makes sense that she would feel incapable of moving on from that. But what made Riker such a great person to pull her through that is he knew her history, he knew what she was capable of. And so one thing is what he was seeing in her, she could believe because she knew, even if she didn't feel that now, she knew that what he was seeing in her was based on something. It wasn't just fluff, it wasn't just what he was saying. She knew that it was based on who she had been. She wasn't confident she could still be that person, but he was patient enough with her to get her to that point. And I also think the fact that he was such a strong character, that him viewing her as strong really helped, and he knew what he needed to do to like push that strength, oftentimes almost in a way where he like would kind of poke her, like make her get angry, because in that feistiness, that's where she reminded herself that she was strong, she could fight back, there was this ability to rise above. And so I think he was the perfect person to do that, because he knew what her buttons were, and so he knew how to bring that out of her.
Well, I mean, kind of listening to you, it sounds like you have figured out this dark element, but keeping it in a way that, doesn't get too dark, doesn't get too off-putting. I would love to know a little bit more about how you do approach the darker subject matter, the heavier topics. We've already mentioned like the domestic abuse, things of that nature. How do you approach those and stay sensitive and come at them from like a caring perspective?
Hang on. Not
Okay.
sure what happened. Oh, wait, there you are again. That was
Yeah, I
weird.
can, I
It
can
clicked
hear
out for
you.
a second. I think I heard you for the most part. How do I approach
Yeah,
the darker subject
basically,
matter?
yeah, like with sensitivity and care.
Um, well, one thing I think is important is not to shy away from emotions. I think sometimes when dark subjects are mentioned, it can be so heavy that it can be kind of this balancing act where you're wondering, should I deep dive? And I often think that if you don't deep dive, this is my personal opinion, into the pain of it, it almost makes it harder to digest that subject matter, because it's not like you're not fully pulled through it. And so I think the only way we feel the triumph is if we feel, the valley. Like you've got to remember that you were down, like they were down here, and what that looks like. And I don't think you necessarily need to go through details. I don't like a lot of on page abuse, if that makes sense, because I don't think that's necessary for the emotion. I think it's okay to recap. I think it's okay to say, at least for me, this is not for all authors, of course, just in my experience. Um, I like to, you know, to give those moments of, this is what happened, this is why my power was ripped from me, this is why it hurt, this is why I can't get over that. And it's okay to know the details, but I don't necessarily like to have too much on page, because I think that can almost be jarring enough that, at least for me, it would pull me out of the story, where I'm almost so overwhelmed that I can't quite stay in the pain, because it's almost like you kind of put a wall up, if that makes sense. So for me, I like to deep dive into the emotions without shock value, I guess. And then let it sit and kind of give a minute. I know sometimes I stay a little longer in a scene, and sometimes I want that little bit of discomfort there, just because that makes that triumph a little better. Um, did that answer? Okay.
Yeah, no, that was, I like
Well,
that
I'm like,
perspective.
am I going off on a tangent there? But yeah.
No, I think that's a great perspective because yeah, it is a different type. There are some darker subject matter, and you do have to read it, and some people don't love that. So it is nice to hear, a perspective where that's not always on page. Um,
Yeah.
Another element that is maybe unique to you, she is a single mom, And I would love a little bit more detail about how writing a single parent differs from maybe other characters you've written. And also, how do you find the line of including the child while not making them the center of the story?
Well, that is a hard line to toe because there's always going to be people who want more and people who want less. So one is I've never written a single mom before, so this was my first single parent. And of course, that shifts the focus because you've got a package deal. And so a lot of her fears and concerns and just day to day issues have to do with more than just her. She can't just think about her. She can't just think about Riker. She has to think about her son. Um, and I tried to do enough scenes so that you could see the formation of the family and sense it. And, but he was 3. And so what I didn't want to do is make it dialogue heavy with him because I think at least in darker books, if it was a flat contemporary, that would be a little different. If we were doing small town and you want the cute child dialogue throughout the book more, then that would make sense. But because of the tone and the nature of the things that were happening, it didn't fit the scenes as well. So I did my best to do kind of scenes like paced throughout where you get to see him, you get to hear his thoughts and see, Riker and Mercy and the brothers interacting with him, but that it didn't become overwhelming, that it didn't become bogged down by a child in it just because that wasn't the tone of the story.
I think you did a great job. Again, not that you need my opinion here, but I thought it was
Well,
done
I'm not
really
going to turn
well.
down flattery, so
Well, because sometimes it can feel like this a child is just a prop, and then you're like, well, where did they go? Do they matter? Or sometimes it's like, okay, it's a little much, but yeah, I think you did great.
thanks, thanks. It was different too. Again, like in the resort, there's so many options for people to be with him. So they didn't really have that. In a small town romance, if somebody's writing that and you're a single mom and you've got to find a sitter, I mean, that child is going to be present even more because you don't always have the options, and that's part of the story, which that wasn't really part of this story because they have endless options. So I will say, I think as far as a single parent romance goes, I had a little bit of an easier task, seeing as how they had a staff and the brothers and so many people to pitch in. But
Well, yeah, I mean, but I think that's part of what makes it fun too, is because you get to see. I loved that it kind of introduced us more to the other brothers, and we kind of have their personality traits to look forward to in the coming books. I thought that that was a really great way to kind of do, the two birds kind of thing.
yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
so Riker and Mercy, I think they're kind of inevitable when you meet them. You just know, like, this is kind of going to be a big deal. But I am interested about their story in the sense of, well, I just completely lost my train of thought. They are somewhat of a slow burn. I think, like, you know that they're going to happen, you know that they're inevitable, but getting to that point where they are ready to kind of take that next step in their relationship, it's kind of slow going. And I want more insight as to how you keep a slow burn with that tension, but not going so slow that your readers kind of lose interest.
Well, so actually, in the world of writing, mine technically aren't slow burns. But in the world of romance readers, they are. So it's like always interesting because technically, when you like, if you're like, if you were a writer and how to write a slow burn, it would say like they weren't really together until 70%. And mine are generally right around the 45 to 60%, right? So it's like slightly before, like that's when they start to kind of come together on my different books. And I think for me it works because I think you get the tension without the oh my gosh, come on already. At least that's how I'm hoping to give it. But I like to have, I think suspense helps because you can have plot moving scenes where you have small, the small moments that are like just part of a romance where because not everything is like they where they jump into it. So in a slow burn, you've got to kind of have those small moments, the moments where he's a little closer to me than a friend would be. He's the way he's talking, right? He's leaning in a little bit more, or he's got his hand on the small of my back, and those small things that are things in real life that we notice where it's like, okay, that was a more than a friend kind of touch, because it's not all at once. But you have to have those, I think, if you're trying to do that slow burn within the context of something else that's happening so that the reader doesn't get bored. Because so I think with suspense it works because you've got all these other things taking place and it's busy, and so you can have these small kind of flirty moments, but also have things that are driving the plot forward, keeping the reader interest so it doesn't feel like it's bogged down by that.
Yeah, it's not like the main thing, so you can have your focus spread elsewhere.
Yeah, for sure. Because I do think like if you just have a straight romance, it's harder to do a slow burn without those plot elements because you've got to try to be keeping the reader engaged. And I'm always impressed by writers who really master that slow burn in just like a contemporary romance, and it pulls you along. They do an amazing job. So
What do you remember what the word count of this one was?
it's 126,000.
That is impressive. I'm impressed that anyone can write that many words.
It's my smallest. It's my smallest book. I will say, so the court series, the books are a little longer. They're all about 150. Um, because the plot is very intricate. And I would rather have it be slightly longer and have the reader understand what is happening than brush over those tiny recaps. So when there's a lot of plot points, I often add in like a reminder, a sentence or two, just this is why this is important. And so in an intricate plot, I think those are important, but of course it adds up. Um, not 25,000 words. So overall, it was probably longer too, but it does add to the overall plot. So those are a little longer because the plot was very intricate. These I'm hoping to keep like this length or slightly less. We'll see. I'm not great at writing super short, so we'll see. That might be the best I can do, but
I'm kind of jumping around here, but you mentioned that you just like published your first, and not just, but 2024. I mean, it's almost 2 years, but not that long ago. So,
it's
where
been
did,
18 months.
yeah, how did that happen? Like, how do you go from not having this series to suddenly you have a whole series and you're already started on the next one in 18 months?
It was a whirlwind. This is not, so Burning Ivy was not the first book I tried to write. It's the first one I published, but I have, I think like maybe six or seven books that are like shelved that all different genres, all different, I think only one isn't romance, but different things. Not all of them are suspense. I have a rom-com, I have different types of books. While I was finding kind of like what my space was. Where was I comfortable writing? Which book lit me up the most? And when Burning Ivy kind of came to me, when that story, and I could see like that 9 book, I knew that was the one. I was like, this is the one I'm going to lead with. I'm going to write it. And I'm going to publish it. And then it was kind of just a whirlwind. I I wrote it I think in May, I started writing it. Like the first chapter was like mid to late May of 2023 and published it at the end of January 2024. So, um, but that was just a whirlwind because I had to figure out like, how do you do that? Like, what do I do? So there's a lot of hurdles, but yeah, so it's kind of messy, but and a little bit like drinking out of a fire hose, but I have survived so far. And yeah,
Here we are.
yeah, exactly. Here we are.
Do you have a favorite scene that isn't spoilery that you want to share from Rolling 75?
Um, Well, let's see. That isn't so. There are two spicy scenes. I'll tell you my three top, and then you can tell me which one, and I'll embellish a bit. So I love the mirror scene because I feel like it's very empowering for her. I love the champagne bath scene because that just feels kind of iconic. I love it. And I love the prohibition ball, the dancing and all of that. So if you pick which one and I'll describe more.
Um, why don't we go with the ball because I think balls are always fun to talk about.
Yeah, I loved that. I won't give all the details of what they have to do, but I liked the different elements that they put their exclusive members through in order to attend. I thought that was really fun, and it became this kind of event as I was creating it that I wanted. I wished I could attend, right? Like I'm like this would be so fun, and so I really had a good time. And I'm like I said before, I'm so visual that I had fun writing the scenes, where it was prohibition inspired, and we've got the flapper dresses and the way the different movements when they were swing dancing and the champagne fountains and the opulence of it. And here you have this room full of the world's most nefarious criminals who are all in this kind of like underground society of Lulu Noir, and they are dancing until dawn and eating hors d'oeuvres and kind of like they not a care in the world in that moment. And I liked kind of the dichotomy of that of like we lurk in the shadows, but we do it with a champagne toast and and dancing until dawn. And so I enjoyed that scene.
A mafia prom, someone said. That's a fun way to describe it.
Yes, a mafia prom is kind of like, yeah, love that.
Yeah, well, for anyone who hasn't read it yet, that is a very fun scene. I had a lot of fun reading it. And it was, like you said, a very atmospheric. So it just kind of felt very, you're in the moment and you're not there, you want to be there, but you can feel like you're there. It was very fun.
Oh, love that.
So, if readers could only take away one thing from this story in particular, what would you want that to be?
Well, I would say that this story is very much in line with kind of just how I write. It tends to be the underlying theme. And this one might be a little bit more, there's a lot more empowerment in this one, but definitely like I said before, like the beauty and the broken and the, not to let those life altering moments shut you down. And so I think in my at the beginning of the book, my dedication, I did something along the lines of like resilience is gold, and that was represented in the book. But I like that idea of we all get shattered, different degrees, but we all have those moments that are shattering. But find those people that can help you piece it back together, and you'll be even stronger after it. Like that, the strength that you get from that is so much more powerful than what you had before. That event then becomes the catalyst to something even more beautiful.
Yeah. Well, do you want to share, or is there any piece of advice that you would be willing to share? Maybe one little tidbit to aspiring writers or people that want to publish their own book?
Oh, well, so many. I feel like I have learned so many. I could do like one of those little like these are the things, but I saw that mentioned. So I guess my first instinct is, before you publish, you are just a writer, and that's like such a beautiful thing because writing is so creative, and it's just this like outpour of your soul, right? And you're able to just let it be that. And then you publish and it takes on this business piece. And that can be really challenging to balance, to decide which voices you're listening to balance the marketing and the critics and the social media, all those things that come into it that can be so challenging. So I guess I would say, and I don't always follow this, but when you write that next book. So you're going to publish the first book and you'll have been able to write it with just your heart in mind. But when you publish that second book, I feel like there's this piece of you that's like, what did they say about the first? What did they think about that? What worked, what didn't? And while that's good, I would say you have to write that book for you and for the reader who gets what you're doing. And that might be two people on one book and two, 100,000 on the next. You never know like who's going to get what you're doing, but that's who you're writing for, because there's always going to be the people who aren't. And I think if you keep that in mind, then you can keep going, one more chapter, one more chapter, um, instead of getting so hung up on what works for the people who maybe didn't think things worked, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Final thing before we go, can you give us like a little sneak peek insight into what's next for this series?
Um, I'm not releasing much on this. And the reason is you haven't read Court, but La Lune Noire, the Noire Brothers, it takes place in a time skip in the Court series. So I feel like those readers specifically are looking for answers. And so I don't know, maybe not that kind, but I like stringing them along a little bit because it's just like it's part of the suspense. So I am trying to release very little at a time. And then I will release like as we get closer, I'll release who's next. But it's five books, so all five brothers get a book, and my goal is to have each book able to be read whether you've read the one before or not. Um, we'll see how that goes. I have not done that before, so we'll see how seamlessly that goes. But that's pretty much what's next.
Do you have a publishing timeline you're trying to hit? Maybe just for the next one?
Um, well, my placeholder is March of 2026. I'm generally a few months before that, before the placeholder date that I pick. So um, I haven't given any dates. I'm hoping, by the end of 2025. So that's the goal. But I always have to, I'm always careful because I think that anytime you have those timelines, it can kind of almost put the pressure on the writing, and I want the story to be able to breathe. So that's what it's looking like. So we'll see. I've got the audio for Rolling 75 coming out in September. So I like to kind of have something that's coming out every 2 to 3 months. So it would be nice if I could get the next book out before the end of the year.
Well, I mean, good luck. I believe in you, but also no pressure. No pressure. You just gotta do you. But thank
Yes.
you so much for joining me. I have loved chatting with you, and everyone needs to go read Rolling 75 and Court if you haven't, which I have not yet, so that'll be on my TBR. But thank you for joining me, and maybe we can talk about one of the next ones.